Amal Yusuf is a 42-year-old female who immigrated to the United States when she was 18 from the Netherlands, where she resided 3 years. At age 17, her mother sent her to France for education. Upon arrival, she decided to not stay in France as her destination to acquire education. Amal assessed the situation of her hosting aunt and the Somalian embassy in France. Without any rest from her trip to India, she proceeded from France to the Netherlands. Amal was relentless in her effort to educate herself. Amal had spent little over 3 years in the Netherlands, where she attended school while residing in a refugee camp in Eindhoven and in Moorhead. She was then settled from the refugee camp to residence in The Hague. After 4 years of arrival her home in The Hague, she pursued education again, where she resided at her residence in The Hague. Amal had sought education taught by Americans when in The Hague. Shortly after her surge, from her school in the Netherlands, she decided to take off to the United States, where she boarded a plane from Düsseldorf, Germany to New York direct flight. Upon arrival, she only had the contact of her cousin in Virginia. She boarded a bus from New York to New Jersey, from New Jersey to Washington, D.C. Concise bio of the author, part 2. Amal had settled with her cousin and his friend while she obtained her asylum and hired a DC-based attorney who had taken her case to the Immigration and Naturalization Services in Arlington, Virginia. Within 4 days, Amal had been granted her asylum status. She only remained in Virginia while she obtained her work permit, which was used to acquire driver's license or state identification, and was her only identification to get proof of legal status and her identity. As soon as the work permit arrived, she boarded a Greyhound bus to Minnesota. Despite her girlfriend's diversion to not move to Minnesota and her cousin's discouragement to not move to Minnesota as well. The destination of the bus from Virginia to Chicago, from Chicago to Ohio, and finally to Minnesota. That's what it was. Shortly after her arrival, she had been receiving complaints about fairness in service delivery of the Somali-run service organizations in Minnesota, mainly based in Minneapolis, that triggered interest for Amal to start a nonprofit called Somalian Women's Association, who in 4 years went from one office to 3 offices, and in 2004, clients that were refugees, meaning had been in the United States less than 5 years, her office became the preferred mode for many Somali families and single women with children. After 2 years, Amal declined to leave, but the attorney who had her certificate of incorporation and incorporated her organization had left, where she was known last. Concise bio of the author, part 3. Amal was unable to obtain her legal certificate from the law firm in Minneapolis. Amal remained there for another 2 more years and closed without any regret. Finally, the closing was contributed by violation of her citizenship rights, where she could not attend the Republican Convention in New York in 2004, and when she boarded an American airplane and landed in New York, she had been coerced to contain in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Manhattan beyond her plan. Upon arrival in Minneapolis, her decision to downsize the organization in order to improve delivery of service and quality of life for its customers had cancelled due to the threat to her civil rights. Her decision to change her fundraising and do fundraising in the office rather than outsource and to minimize office politics had been seized as well. The goal to eliminate business politics and workplace politics that got in the way and hindered continuity and quality of service had been carried on in her office in Hopkins as well, but the IRS made it impossible. When there is money, there is foe. Amal had invested $62,000 in food product development in San Francisco-based food product development company. Concise Biography of the Author Part 4. The aim of the investment was to employ how to employ Somali women and to create employment experience and training for recently arrived refugee women and to fund the programs of the organization so that the mental capacity of the management is freed from office and workplace politics. First, there was a period of business politics shortly after the refined product samples were delivered to the main office of the executive officer. It was indeed a turning point in the life of the chief executive officer. The Internal Revenue Service became involved in the business executive officer. The mental judgment of the executive officer was impaired by the presence and commanded by Amal. Amal makes investment business a non-profit entity. Because of 2 years of business politics in Minneapolis during the product development and 4 years of non-profit management with office and workplace politics, she had no more appetite for more business and office politics. In an effort to cease execution, the IRS had automatically levied tax on the investment business and accused the chief executive officer that she had invested money into her business and she ought to pay taxes on that. If the business had not been started, where would she generate the tax revenue to pay the lien? This clearly was an acumen problem on the IRS part and its limiting officers. Concise Biography of the Author Part 5. The business politics associated with them is not worthwhile. They're also a hot commodity because they're AMFIP and welfare recipients for many social service organizations. After 10 years of limitation on freeze of my credit and reputation, I was in a high tax bracket when I worked there because I was a young single woman who never claimed many of the reductions. Many of the reductions people claim on their taxes and was never married or had kids of my own. That lien had expired May 2018. My freedom have not flourished yet, but my first priority is to get my third degree out of the way after 2 years from 2019, which will be marketing degree. In the 10 years, I was made immobile by the Internal Revenue Service Tax Exam Division. I acquired 8 years of apparel retail experience. It was an unforgettable 8 years of experience where I was always caught between job obligations. I tried to strive every aspect of the job. Nevertheless, it was not an easy, I must admit. In the future, the learning effect throughout this is that I will be a very selective both in private and business life.